Go fire away.
The center rotation with Steele now. Spencer said on Monday that Steele's gaining momentum in the center position. How do you see it?
It's been an awesome competition. We always say like, the rising tide lifts all ships. So it's just making those two guys better. And you can kind of like flip a coin and put a name in a hat, like whatever the analogy is, like who's going to be the guy that starts. But both of them are getting better, which is just awesome to see. So I hope like they keep pushing each other and everyone else sees that. We made it a big point because there's other, as guys get healthy, there'll be other competition battles arise. So like if they can they've done a good job just kind of managing the reps during practice and who's starting, and then no one's getting their feelings hurt, and like they just want to help and contribute to make sure that we do our best on the field.
What are the pros and cons of juggling the center throughout?
It's difficult. It's easy to juggle other positions. That one's a little difficult. So it's a lot on the center to handle, but it's a lot on everyone else. Like everyone else is kind of like, hey, we have to compromise a little bit just to get in rhythm, and that's why we're trying to go on like a little bit longer drives where those guys have a couple series where like, people are getting in rhythm. But it's difficult. It's like when you change the quarterback in those positions where there's a lot of communication. Everyone just says it a little different. The rhythm's a little different. So it's been awesome to see everyone rally around those guys because they see how hard they work in practice, and they both know they're deserving of a chance to play. And it's just unique offensive line. So often you get a guy like slotted, and he's the guy, and he kind of has that position where receivers and tailbacks, skill positions, easy to kind of sub those guys out, give those guys packages. It's more difficult to do that offensive line. So
because of the two guys you have, because of this specific situation, could you be juggling all season long, or do you want to find one guy?
I think always the goal is the competition battle leads to someone becoming clear-cut, like this guy has elevated his game, his prep to be the guy that takes a majority of the reps. I'll always want to have a way of subbing guys in just because as we've seen this year, and every single year I get up here and talk, like guys are going to get injured, so you don't want a player having not played until week 8 because there's been some injury. Like hopefully those guys are still getting in the game plan in some capacity.
From Maddox's perspective, how are they different?
From Maddox's perspective, I try really hard to make them the same, and we do so much shotgun. I think that's kind of the biggest thing too, is like just the under center versus shotgun. So we do a lot of shotgun, so it doesn't have that effect on just where those guys are taking the ball under center. But I think he likes both those guys, and we try to again fold them in practice kind of seamlessly, so they both get reps, and you can't really tell like is it the blue group, is it the orange group, because those guys are just going back and forth.
Do you try and set that rotation, what it looks like before the game, or is it something that you kind of in the flow of the game you say, all right, now it's time for this guy to get in, or now it's time for that guy to get in?
You always have to have a plan. Like you can't just go in blind, kind of like, because it's so emotional and there's so much energy, there's so much stuff going on. So like you always have to have a plan, but it's one of those things too, like we can plan, and then second snap of the Oregon game, a guy you thought was going to play a ton breaks his leg and is out, for an extended period of time. So it's that balance of planning without being too rigid. Our guys still have to be flexible and be able to make adjustments within the game.
I know you guys aren't passing it, 40 times a game, but to give up as few sacks as you have, how impressive has the pass blocking been?
That's one of those things that's always O-line gets too much credit, too much blame. Like that has a lot to do with the quarterback being on time. That has a lot to do with the receivers, right, running the right route, getting open. So if no one's open, there's a good chance we're going to get sacked a bunch because there's nowhere to go with the ball. So the receivers have done a great job of getting open. The tailbacks are, I say that some of like the best in the country, just how much pride they take in pass protection, how good a job they do. So it's really fun. Even our young tailbacks, like that's not something a high school kid does a lot in high school, and our young tailbacks are going in there and doing a great job in pass protection. So it's one of those things where like it's awesome and we rally around that, and that's a big deal to protect the quarterback, but that's an 11-man operation.
In terms of when you watch film and see some of the runs that Ashton has, how much of it is him, when he improvises some of those where it looks like, oh, this might be a 1-yard loss, and it turns out to be a 60-yard touchdown, like does it ever continue to amaze you when you rewind on some of those runs? Or
Every time we're on the sideline watching the iPad, I'm always like, whoa, like, and stuff. It was funny because there's a couple times in the game, as you guys watch the game, like, I'm a little upset on the sideline with the O-line, and like, Coach, we just scored a touchdown. It's like, I know, but we're not blocking like we're supposed to be blocking this thing. Like, that's all on deuce right there. So it's always that, and I go way too far the other side, like, of demanding perfection of the O-line and trying to make sure it's perfect. Like, at the end of the day, like, we're trying to be efficient at whatever the play is called, whether it's run or pass, and however we get that done, whether it's Maddox scrambling and finding an open guy or Deuce making a guy miss. Like, we want our guys to play with confidence, cut it loose, trust their training, because they're trained at an elite level. Like, we train these guys. So when it hits the blue and it's packed and there's a ton of energy and the lights are flickering, like the moment's not too big, they can just go trust it and cut it loose.
Coach Rice, the basketball coach, always said it was easier to show film and get better after a win than a loss, even if it wasn't, just because the guys, they won, so they're still good, but you can really focus on the points that need to be better. Is it like that on some of those runs maybe where they didn't block it perfect, but you still score, where it's like, okay, great, we scored, but look, we could be even better if we do something like that,
Yeah, I think the nature of being like an O lineman and O-line coach is like, I just remember all the bad stuff that happens. Like, O-line, what are O-line stats? Penalties, right? Holdings, sacks. That's what O-line stats. So, like, that's just beat in our head that, like, you remember all the bad things. So as plays are going on, like, I'm thinking about the footwork that we didn't take, not necessarily the big run. So that's just kind of the nature of the position, and that's just what makes those guys special, is they're not in it for the sacks. Like, they're in it to make sure it's blocked perfectly so the skill guys can go do what they do.
A couple more?
Does Ashton improvise better? Is that one of his greatest strengths? Because it seems like he cuts at the right time almost every time.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would classify it as like he improvises. I think Coach Montgomery does a great job with all those guys of, like, he has those guys play the game before the game happens. Like, so they can kind of anticipate those cuts. So as they're running and it may look like he's going in a straight line and like he's making that cut, like he sees it 2 steps before it happens. The way that those guys, the way Coach Montgomery kind of drills those guys and gets those guys ready to play. Like, it's always fun. Like, we watch his drills and his cut drills, and then you go watch Ashton play in the field, and it almost looks exactly the same way. It's like, man, that's pretty special. So Ash is phenomenal player, and he's one of the great ones. So he wants to be coached really, really hard, and he wants people to be critical of him. And Coach Montgomery does a good job of, like, setting it up for him to be successful.
More?
I'll ask one about Cage real quick. I was asking Dirk about him on Monday, and he just said that, like, every time he watches film, number 77 is just doing something good. How consistent is Cage been for you guys this year?
He's like exactly what I want at left tackle, is someone you're like, oh yeah, like that left tackle guy's pretty good, but like he's not flashy, you don't hear his name, there's no issues, like he just kind of rides under the radar because he's doing his job at an elite level. Again, like O lineman, most of the time the guys that you think of are guys that kind of go up and down, have good plays, have bad plays. Like that left tackle spot, like we want that guy to be ultra consistent. He doesn't do anything special. Like, we don't ask him to do anything extraordinary. He doesn't put a cape on and be Superman. Just do his job, and he's done his job at a really, really high level back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, it seems like he drives a minivan. Kind of embodies that everyday work mentality, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's something that happened before I got like OJ. He drove a minivan. Cage is driving a minivan. So I think that's Boise State's all about tradition. That's one of the O-line traditions is minivan for the left tackle. The also left tackle tradition here is you get to go play in the NFL, just like OJ, just like all the great left tackles that have come before here. So hopefully he's on that same trajectory.
Why would a left tackle want to drive a minivan? A big dude is comfortable, or what? Is there a reason behind it you know of?
Have you ever been in a minivan? Minivan's pretty sweet. They don't look good from the outside, but they're very comfortable. They got all the buttons. He can fit his bike completely upright in the back without having to collapse it down. So he's married. He's a different guy.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
He didn't like the